I mean, this document is part of multi-part series about migrating to Google Cloud. So if you have decided that you will be migrating your environment from on-prem and or cloud to Google Cloud, um, this would give you a pretty good idea. We will cover in this one getting started or beginning the journey and the type of migration. Basically, there are kind of lift and shift, improve and move, remove and replace, and then how you're going to adopt cloud framework, and what would be the migration path, so on and so forth. So this will be like I mentioned. This is the first series. There will be more. Um, will streamline the process or give you more information. So for this one, basically this document will help you plan and design and implement the whole process to a Google Cloud. This information, there's a lot of information that are available on the internet, will help you or assist you. And this particular document will help you or provide some context or some information, like how you move application from one environment to another one, because it's kind of challenging task even for experienced folks. It's not because of it's difficult, it's because this is not something people do every day. So this document will be useful if you are planning migrating from an on-prem environment, like you have your personal data center, private hosting environment, which is known as colo, or another cloud provider, for example, AWS and or Azure, moving to Google Cloud, or simply if you are just evaluating the opportunity to migrate and want to explore what it might look like. So let's start. So this one is like beginning the journey. So you can see on the right side top where it just demonstrates your data center or your on-prem, um, server room. Is not a server room. It's like a lot bigger than. So if you're planning to the Google Cloud, you can start by defining the environment that are involved in the migration. Your starting point would be your on-prem, your the hosting environment, or if you're using a public cloud environment. For example, if you have a on-prem environment, it will ask you to, you know, the where you have the full ownership and responsibility, and you will how much. I mean, this is basically like on your on-prem, you have full control. You have the complete responsibility, how you manage your physical security, hardware maintenance, cooling, heating, security, all these things. So that's basically your on-prem, right? And what is the colo or private hosting? When you have a data center where you just have an extension of your data center, and for that, you kind of outsource your physical infrastructure to some other management or external party, and you basically infrastructure is shared between you as a customer and with the other customer basically. And in a private hosting environment, you don't manage the physical security, right? And the safety services. So some hosting environment will let you manage part of your physical hardware, such as servers, rack, network cables, and in some other cases they do it for you. And also they do provide some smart hands just in case if you need some assistance in case of emergency. So typically power and network cabling are provided as a service to you, but you can manage it if you want to. Otherwise, you don't have to manage if it's going, out of the data center, coming into the data center. But you will maintain full control over your hypervisor, which is your virtualization platform, and physical servers, and all the workload. That's your responsibility. So that's the difference between on-prem and colo, right? So some responsibilities are handed over to management company. Of course, you have to pay for it. And then it comes to a public cloud environment. So what's the advantage of public cloud? There are so many. except one because it costly. It costs a lot of money, but you don't have to manage the whole resource stack by yourself. Basically, you can focus whatever is most valuable to you, but you don't have to worry about underlying physical infrastructure. You don't have to manage the resources, virtualization, a hypervisor. You can build a virtual infrastructure, from ground up, meaning you're not setting up the servers, but actual virtual load. And you can deploy your workload in a new infrastructure, which is provided to you by the cloud provider. You can also buy fully managed services where you can only care about your workload and let them handle day-to-day managing or runtime environment. So right here for each environment, this document evaluates following aspect as well as who should provide and manage the relevant services. So this is just like overall for the resources, the on-prem environment, private hosting environment, and public environment. So basically, this just a quick overview. In on-prem environment, physical security, power, cabling, network, hardware, maintenance, virtualization platform, and app resources is all you. It's all about you. And the same goes for a private hosting environment where physical security, like we mentioned in the previous slide, is a service provider, power and network service provider, hardware maintenance depend on the service provider. They can do it, or if you have with the maintenance agreement with the vendor, they will assist. But the rest of it is you, virtualization, app resources, you manage it. For public cloud environment is more like you can see the first stop for a service provider. Security, don't have to worry about it. Power, cable, hardware maintenance, this is or virtual platform. They provide you all of them. The only thing you do is your app resources. Of course, it comes with some price. For example, if you host in public environment or public cloud, you will not have the console access. Just like in VMware, when something goes wrong and machine is not booting up and you cannot connect, you just go to VMware or Hyper-V and you have the console access. But in a public cloud environment, that access is not available. So basically, you should treat your servers as kettles. So if something is not working, either you restore it from the backup or just slaughter them and rebuild from scratch. So this is basically telling you, hey, after you define your starting and target environment, basically you decided, hey, which environment you are going to. Then you define the workload type, like you have to categorize, like, how many different type of workload do you have, and the scope of the migration. So this document basically covered two type of workloads, and operation, legacy, and cloud native. So cloud native means, trust me, there are still folks are still using Windows 2000, 2003, 2008, or Windows XP. So that's or some application which are pretty old application. So those comes under legacy workload. And so basically, if you have a legacy workload and operations are developed without any consideration for cloud environment, so they are not compatible. So they will not work well with the cloud. So and if you have something which is running for like 20, 30 years and the vendor is out and you don't have a developer and you don't have any problem and you want to continue to use it, that's fine. But if you have to modify it just for the sake of moving to the cloud, it's pretty expensive. Um, because they don't support scalability, or like you have 10 servers, for example, physical server running your old application or web application, and that doesn't support scalability, like taking advantage of the newer technology like virtualization and auto up, scale up or scale down, then it would be pretty expensive to do it. And if you have some applications which are cloud native, and they are scalable, portable, and available and secure, So the workload and operation can help increase developer productivity and agility because developer can focus on the actual workload rather than spending efforts to manage development and runtime environment on dealing with manual and cumbersome development process. So Google Cloud has a, for the cloud native workload, Google Cloud has a shared responsibility model for security. Google Cloud is also responsible for the physical security, just like we discussed in previous slides. And this is not just related to Google Cloud. This is true for the all other public cloud providers. So you should consider following, for example, if you are deciding to move to cloud from your on-prem. So number one is on-prem or private hosting with legacy workload. We just talked about it. And then same thing with the cloud native workload. So the difference between the first two is a legacy workload as well as a cloud native workload. Then we talk about the public cloud or private hosting. This is another option you have, same with legacy and with cloud native. So these are the things you have to consider for your starting one. And the migration process depends on your starting point where you are based on this information listed above right here. Um, sorry. So the if you if like I said, if you have a cloud native environment such as public cloud can be challenging and risky for migration to a kind of the moving legacy or on-prem apps to the cloud often require multiple migration steps. So sometimes you have one application or like an operating system or application, you just cannot migrate. You have to take different steps to accomplish what you when you're trying to migrate to the cloud. So what's a migration means? Normally people do lift and shift, like you have a AWS provider lift and shift, and there are other cloud provider provide lift and shift. So there are like there are different migration. And normally there are more than three, but these are the major. Lift and shift means you take whatever you have, like your server or application, you virtualize it and move it to Azure and or AWS or Google Cloud, for example. If that's just one, that's the most common people use it, and then we'll talk about it on each migration process in the next slide. So the other one is improve and move, and the third one is basically remove and replace, sometimes called rip and replace. Like if hey, this application or can be replaced, then you just remove it and then replace it with the cloud. So we will go through with all these three scenarios in next slide. So the next slide is basically lift and shift. We're going to talk about a lift and shift, right? So in a lift shift operation, you move workload from a source environment to a target environment with minor or no modification or refactoring. Basically, like I mentioned, you take it, you do a P2V, physical to virtual or virtual to virtual migration, and here you go. So what's the benefit of this one? This is ideal when you can operate as is in the target environment. So meaning you don't have to make any change of anything. So I mean, when say don't have to change it, you still have to change a little bit, but it's not significant impacting on your application and or your the workload. Of course, there might be a technical changes to force lift and shift. For example, if you have a Linux machine and you want to migrate, then you have to make sure there are certain things like you have to have a certain packages installed or if the cloud providers support or not, because basically when you move a Linux machine, I'll give you the example for Azure. When you move a Linux machine from on-prem to on cloud, the machine gets changed. Basically it has to be hosted on Hyper-V, so you have to remove your VMware tools, you have to install your Hyper-V tools, and then there are compatibility comes into play prior to moving to the cloud. And sometimes the process is not straightforward. And generally, lift and shift migrations are easiest to perform because your team can continue to use the same sets of tools they were using it before. because nothing is changing at the server levels. Whatever is changing is underlying the hypervisor. So it's kind of easier. On the other hand, results of lift and shift are a non-cloud native workload running in target environment. These workloads don't take full advantage of the cloud platform. So if you do lift and shift for a legacy application, then yeah, then there are less advantage, and it's kind of a little bit more difficult. And of course, it costs a little bit more too. So this is just a lift and shift, which is most common and widely used. Now we're talking about improve and move. So what is improve and move? Like I said, you modernize the workload while migrating it. In this type of migration, you modify the workload to take advantage of cloud native capabilities and not just to make them work in a new environment. For example, you have an authentication method, right? Maybe you're using ADFS. So when you move it to the cloud, you might want to change it from ADFS to different authentication method. This is just one tiny example. And also, like for example, if your current architecture or infrastructure of an app isn't supported in the target environment, as it is, a certain amount of refactoring is necessary to overcome these limits. This is a fancy words, for example, but basically you have to modify. You have to, let's say you have a SQL always on cluster and you want to move to the cloud. It might not support the SQL always on clustering. I mean, and of course the Azure will support, but you have to have a workaround to do it. Another reason to choose an improve and move approach is when major update to the workload is necessary in addition to update you need to make to migrate. For example, if you're running a pretty old version of the software or OS, so this is the time to upgrade and then move. And improve and move migration let your app leverage feature of the cloud platform such as scalability and high availability. For example, if you have the web server behind your on-prem load balancer, for example, then you can take that into the cloud and use the cloud native scale up or scale down opportunities. And there are a lot more basically where you do improve and move. And also improve and move migration takes longer than lift and shift, of course, because when you do improve and move, as soon as you do improve, then you have to do the testing. It takes longer to validate whatever changes you made or whatever improvement you made. If it doesn't work, you have to roll back and go back and improve again. And of course, it's going to take much longer versus lift and shift, which is just take whatever you have and move it, like we talked in the previous slide. And improve and move migration also requires you to learn new skill sets. So this is also very important for the team who is migrating because you have to learn new tools, a new way to manage your workload in cloud. And a remove and replace. This is another strategy which is kind of less common, but still a lot of companies, use remove and replace. Or you can use all three together. You don't have to choose one of those three. The migration strategy, see which one is good for which load, basically. So in this one, you decommission an existing app, completely redesign and rewrite it as a code native apps. If this is not a code native apps, if it's off the shelf, chances are most likely you can upgrade. But if this is something is developed in-house, then of course it's going to take a little longer time. Not a little longer time, maybe a lot longer time. So if the current app isn't meeting your goals, for example, you don't want to maintain it, it's too costly to migrate using the one previously mentioned approaches, or it's not supported on Google Cloud, you can do a remove and replace migration. This is just a fancy word of saying, hey, get rid of it. And also, they will let you take the full advantage. This remove and replace the Google Cloud features, such as horizontal scalability, highly managed services, and high availability. This is not just limited to the Google Cloud. All clouds provide this basic um, option. Because you are rewriting the app from scratch, you can also remove the technical debt of the existing legacy version. Now, that's no brainer. Of course, when you're rewriting, you're going to use the latest features if possible. So this strategy will definitely take a much longer than a lift and shift and improve and move migration. And this type of migration isn't suitable for off-the-shelf apps because it requires rewriting the apps. You need to evaluate the extra time and efforts to redesign and rewrite the app as part of the life cycle. And of course, the last one is pretty important. So as you can see, lift and shift do not require in terms of new skill sets. And this one, remove and replace, will definitely require a new skill set. So you need to use a new tool chain or to provision and configure the new environment and to deploy the app in that environment. So now you have the option for all three migration strategy. You can use all three depending which application you wanted to use with what migration strategy. And our next slide is how are you going to cloud adoption framework. So before you start your migration, for example, you should evaluate the maturity of your organization, meaning how serious they are. And the Google framework serves both as a map for determining where your business information technology capabilities are now, and as a guide to where you want to be. So this is just a suggestion. You can use this framework to assess your organization's readiness for Google Cloud. And I would say for other clouds as well, what you need to do to fill the gaps and develop new competencies as illustrated in the following diagram, which is coming. Or you can see it right here, actually. Learn, load, scale, and source. And we will discuss with all the technical, strategic, and transformational strategies in coming slides. So this is just a overview what you should do. So basically, it assesses four themes like learn, lead, scale, and secure. So what is learning? The quality and scale of your learning progress, like a self-taught, third-party reliance, organizational training, third-party assisted, peer learning and sharing, third-party staff augmentation only. So these comes under learn. When we talk about the lead, the extent to which your IT department are supported by mandate from leadership to migrate to the Google Cloud. So this is where it's very, very important that your journey should include from the leadership to all the team, your technical team. They all have to be on board because for the success, they all have to work together. So for the lead, for the lead, it's like teams by function, new cross-functional cloud team, and cross-functional feature teams for greater autonomy. When we're talking about a scale, so like you use cloud native services and how much operational automation you currently have in your place and how much you're going to use it. And this comes under scale, and you can see the scale is change is slow and risky and operational heavy. Templates ensure good governance without manual review. You have to use, like an automated system kind of thing. All changes is constant. Change is constant. How risk and quickly fixed. So these are all coming within the scale. And when we're talking about secure, the capability to protect your current environment from unauthorized and inappropriate access. So this is just a general idea about cloud adoption framework. Um, our if we go a little bit more on that, the things we didn't discuss about the tactical, strategic, and transformational topics. So these are here. For tactical perspective, there are no coherent plan covering all individual workload you have in place. You are mostly interested in a quick return on investment and little disruption to your IT organization. So this is one. If you do a strategic, this is a plan in place to develop individual workload with an eye to future scaling needs. You are interested in the midterm goal to streamline operation to be more efficient than they are today. And the last one, transformational, is cloud operation work smoothly and you use data that you gather from those operations to improve your IT business. You are interested in the long-term goal of making the IT department one of the engines of innovation in your organization. So these are different depending upon your organizational need. You can choose this one of those three. And again, a little bit more on this one, the four phases of your migration we briefly touched. So these are basically you assess, you plan, you deploy, and you optimize. So obviously, I think the name describes what the action should be. What you do in the assess, basically you perform a thorough assessment and discovery of your existing environment so you can understand your application inventory and you can identify dependency, requirement, how much it's going to cost, establish a performance benchmark. So when it goes to the cloud, you know if it's performing against your benchmark or not. Then it comes to the plan basically. So this is the second phase, and you create a basically basic cloud infrastructure on your workload, and then and plan how you're going to move your application and planning. Of course, the major part is identity management, organization, and project structure. Who's how the project going to proceed, and networking. So the most important thing is your identity management and networking, sorting your apps, developing how which application going to go first. And there is a term used for like, hey, you have to set up your landing zone. Basically, that's the term we use when we do migrate to Microsoft Azure, and the Azure has a lot of information about the landing zone. So once you have the landing zone, then the rest of the process is easier. So when you do a plan, you basically plan your landing zone. When you do a deployment or deploy, so this is the phase where you design, implement, and execute a deployment process to move workload to the Google Cloud. This is the actual being happening, taking your application from the on-prem, all other sources, Colo or the other cloud, and you're actually moving it. And and you can refine the cloud infrastructure to deal new needs. For example, when you migrating it, um, there are a lot more information available how to deploy your workload into Google Cloud. We will discuss this thing in upcoming slides. Like I mentioned, this is just the first slide. There are more coming, not the first slide, for first video, and there are a lot more coming to take to discuss all the options or the migration process basically. And the last part is very important actually. So just to tell you is when you migrate your workload to the cloud, it's pretty expensive. Let's say it's going to cost you $1 million. Then comes the optimization phase. Once you go to the optimization phase, in most cases, the cost will come down to half or 60%, basically, because you have a workload and you understand which server should be powered off during non-business hours, or you can consolidate, or you can downsize. If server has 48 gig of RAM and hey, doesn't need, or it has the high ops disk drives you don't need, then you can downgrade and you can save tons of money. So this is where optimize In this phase, you begin to take full advantage of the cloud native technology and capabilities to expand your business potential to things such as performance. So this is what I said, performance. If you have a lot of resources assigned you're not using, so you can downgrade it. Scalability, disaster recovery, cost, training, as well as open door to a machine learning and artificial intelligence integration to your apps. So this is all helps you optimize your workload. I think this is it on this video. I was trying to keep it, under 25 minutes, but it's still 30 minutes. So what would be next? So next would be how to assess and discover your workload, and we will cover this topic, and this is coming soon. So stay tuned, and if you like this video, please subscribe the channel. Appreciate it. Thank you.